sitting here between push-up sets and just thinking that, it's time to come out of the closet. Mom, Dad, I don't identify as a traditional martial artist anymore. And the reason being is because, well, I'm very disenfranchised with just how we'll say intellectual, the traditional martial arts community seems to be. There is so much that goes on and is passed around as solved fact that is unassailable, that is built upon appeals to authority, that are just anecdotal, that are well-known pieces of mythology, and it goes on. And this is very frustrating because, as my longtime viewers will know, much of the channel is built on basically addressing this kind of stuff. And while there are people who appreciate it and who have taken to it, and I'm thankful for that, so many people, especially when you talk to them in person, here in Japan, no less, will look at you and be like, nuh-uh, and that will be the end of it. So if I'm not a traditional martial artist, then what am I? I don't like this term too much because I feel like I'm just hijacking it from HEMA people, but I kind of think of myself as a historical martial artist. Now, that does not mean that I think we should just be preserving things in perpetuity. I'll get to that in a little bit. But what it does mean is if you're going to make a claim, I want to see sources. And by see, I mean that colloquially. You can bring them up in conversation or whatever, and I can go check them out myself. I'm not saying you have to submit an essay to me necessarily, but I'm so tired of the I'm a gazillionth Don, my authority cannot be questioned, and or on the opposite side of the spectrum, which I find almost more frustrating, is the you present all this evidence to people and they'll be like, well, I'm just a hobbyist. You can't expect me to know that. And then they go on continuing to have these convictions in their ignorance that what they know is true and what you know is false. And they'll never fact check it, even if you hand them all of this information on a silver platter. One example I want to give with this is this idea that Aikido is a weapons martial art. And I've made a post about it, but I want to put it in video here. Historically, I have just accepted this and let it go on. And even now, I'm not opposed to the idea of interpreting it that way. That being said, I've been doing a lot of work recently reading historical manuals from the time period, reading more Aikido stuff, and there's just no evidence to suggest that this was ever the intention. If I'm being honest, there's even evidence to suggest the opposite. A lot of the weapons-based stuff came after the founding of the art and was then reverse engineered onto it, basically. People use weapons to explain or build upon their own theories, their own interpretations, but to say that it's historical would be false. To say that it's traditional, you could argue that. Did the founder have weapons experience? Yes, it seems that way. Was it as good as his peers? I would debate that, even though we do have some anecdotes that suggest that he was very good. What we do know pretty conclusively is that everyone that came after him was not very good, to the extent that there was once a debate about not doing them in public, not doing weapons in public anymore because it's embarrassing. So this weapons theory goes that a lot of the wrist grabs and stuff make sense if you're trying to control a weapon. And sure, but I have not seen any kind of historical evidence of that, as I suggested. In fact, every manual I've seen, pretty much all of the Aikido techniques, I use air quotes here because these techniques exist across so many different martial arts, but the techniques that we now in modern culture tend to associate with Aikido don't come from weapons defense or even from people who are holding weapons. they come from pretty much the same attacks that we do today. Grabs on material, wrist grabs, headlock slash choke type things. These are the defenses. These are the positions that people were worried about. Now, I'm not saying that we have to hyperfixate on that. We don't. In fact, I would strongly recommend we move beyond it. But if you're going to claim that this idea was the secret sauce all along, there is no historical evidence for that. And I would love to be proven wrong. Please, again, show me your sources. Because right now what we have is not sources, but people essentially making it work through their own practice, which is totally fine. I don't have any real problem with that if they're open about just interpreting it that way, as I've said. But you can make a lot of things just work in martial arts generally. Have you seen some of the stupid stuff that goes on in jiu-jitsu that they make work? Imagine if, the weapons argument to me is sort of like saying the buggy choke was a historical thing because people were sneaking into people's houses. You can build this narrative around it, right? The buggy choke. that might be a more accurate description of that technique. But the buggy choke is not historical. There's no historical evidence that it was ever a thing until the 2010s, somewhere in there.
Editing Tengu here, I just wanted to add to the whole weapons debate thing that if you really believe that it's a weapons martial art, then why do Aikido people not just train weapons all the time? Like, why do we do this whole crap where it's like, well, the hands, they represent what you can't source sticks. I can find sticks outside on the ground for free. It's like, why go through that? You should be training it all the time if it's a weapons martial art. That's just efficiency. And we know through photographic evidence that it wasn't trained that way even back in the day. So this notion that it's a weapons martial art is contradicted by the fact that it's not weapons forward. The weapons just kind of are there to explain the open-handed stuff, not really the other way around as far as I can tell. Now, again, I'd love to be proven wrong about this, but like if this is, as some have suggested, a martial art for defending oneself when someone else is trying to take your weapon away from you, why have we never trained that way? No one had that idea, not even once. Not the founder, not any of his students, not any of the offshoot styles of Aikido. It's a very new internet-based idea. Just food for thought. Now, again, I'm not saying you can't interpret it that way, but, if that's the stance you're going to take, then, extraordinary claims, extraordinary evidence. Back to me ranting in the middle of a workout.
That's one component of why I'm not a traditional martial artist anymore, I don't think. Because if I were a traditional martial artist, I would just accept the traditional narratives, and I just can't intellectually do that anymore. In practice, too, I have my doubts about the whole weapons thing. If you put a marker in the hand of a point sparring karateka, this is an interesting real story, actually, because I kind of came up in a mix of contact and point spars. The point spars, I think if they went and learned a knife art, would be fucking devastating. Because they have extremely fast hands, and I swear to you, as soon as they learn that they can cut on the way out and not just on the way in, good luck handling them. You are going to get shredded, and that's why I really don't buy into the whole weapons-based thing either. Because if people have already decided to harm you, they're probably going to harm you. I hate to say it, but it's just true. If you go and look up, and I don't recommend it because it's quite gruesome, but you can go and look up political assassinations in Japan, and people tuck the knife into their chest and just kind of American football, tackle the person and fall on them with the blade. How is Aikido equipped to handle that? And they come out of a blind spot as well. It's if they've already decided to harm you, I'm not saying that it's impossible to defend yourself, but I'm saying it's deeply unlikely. And certainly at the moment, there is nothing in the mainstream Aikido curriculum that handles that. So, no, I don't buy into it. And again, I would love to be proven wrong. If you bring me some historical sources, if you can bring me some contemporary data about Aikidoka and defending against weapons, that would be great. And I don't mean anecdotes. I don't mean, well, one time, I want data at this point. Anecdotes are good supporting evidence, but you do need a spine of like, well, X percent of encounters with Aikido, resulted in this outcome. That's what I'm looking for. And on the history side of things, I would want, to plot data points. This person of authority said this about weapons. This person agreed. This person agreed. Oh, this person didn't agree. And you can grow a pattern. Then you can layer anecdotes on top of that. That would make a convincing argument. But this thing that we accept where it's like, well, one time this happened. Yeah, I'm guilty of it too, but we really need to move away from that. It's just not rigorous. It doesn't mean anything by itself. The other point that I move away from traditional ideas, at least in the Japanese context, and I might even go as far as to say the East Asian context more generally, is this idea that competition is bad. Now, I am of two minds on competition. I don't think that you need to compete all the time. I don't think competition should be an institution, because I think it gets in the way of training, quite frankly. People make it about winning instead of being about a barometer to test yourself. On the other hand, though, I think arts that actively move away from competition are doomed to tyranny by appeals to authority. One of the things that I like about competitive judo is that you will get this old guard who's like, judo today has declined. It's bad. I hate the way that so-and-so does his judo. But if so-and-so is winning, what can the old guard say? Get fucked. I'm winning. It's whereas like in Aikido, there is no way to challenge the calcified, gentrified, old elder elite, essentially, except to outlive them, which means that things do not move in a quick fashion at all. And in fact, it just reinforces staying in the same place, because then by the time innovative minds do get to that age and that level and they're calling the shots, they look back on their own history and we're like, well, I had to suffer through the tyranny of the elders. Now everyone else has to. It's my turn. I'm not going to give it up. I'm not going to step away. So I do think a competitive outlet is necessary. And you'll notice that I didn't say anything about function there, because I don't think competition and function are one-to-one. But I do think you need a way, especially in East Asian culture, to challenge the elder class, we'll say. And I think the way to do that is competition. I think it's very interesting, because something that I tell people all the time is that if you really want to train and get at a high level at any of these Japanese martial arts, karate, aikido, judo especially, you have to go to the universities. And the reason why is because they compete. It's all about, can you do the thing? And so far, competition is kind of the best way to do that. There is a parallel way that you can train, and that's going to machi dojo, these kinds of like city dojos. And oftentimes, people will not like me for saying this, but usually that thread, the kind of hobbyist route, is headed by the Hombu, the HQ, the headquarters dojo for judo. That's Kodokan. For Aikikai, that's Kobukan. I think it's just called Aikikai Hombu most of the time, but here in Shinjuku. So I mean, people think that that's the core of the martial art. And I'm not saying that they're not good. They often aren't decent, but they ain't like the universities. That's a different thing. And people are not aware of this parallel tract that exists. And this is often why you see, especially in judo, this sort of friction between the Kodokan and like the Olympic Committee. And don't get me wrong, the Olympic Committee has made tons of shit decisions, in my opinion. The leg ban. But on the flip side of that, I find the Kodokan often gets in their own way. They're regressive. They fall into this position where they just want things to stay the same forever, and that's how you get this gentrified, calcified elder elite class that cannot be argued against. It just so happens that in this particular case with the whole leg grab debate, that they are falling on the right side of the argument. But I promise you that's coincidental. It's not because the Kodokan is necessarily interested in the progress of judo so much as they are interested in preserving the idea of tradition. In this case, it's a good idea. In many cases, it's not. Reason one was that people don't give sources. I'm more historical in that sense. I need historical data, and if not historical data, then contemporary data. I'm done with the anecdotes. I'm done with the appeals to tradition. I'm tired of it. The second thing is there needs to be a way for younger people to not supplant, but to communicate to the elder generation that their time has passed. And I'm not trying to get on the. I don't think that everything should be run by young people because young people are stupid. But I do think there has to be a balance. There has to be a conversation. One side cannot have a monopoly on the art. It's a great way to screw everything up. And then the third and final thing is about fitness. And I've made many posts about this, and I made videos about this, and I'll say it again. I am tired of traditional martial artists just looking for intellectual, cerebral answers to everything, when a lot of the time the answer is just get fit. Now, there's respectful ways to go about doing this. Different people are at different levels with their fitness journey. They have different priorities. People work, people need to study, blah, 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 blah. But what I will say is that the more I look into these old manuals and things like that, a surprising amount of the stuff in there is devoted to just getting in good shape. Now, I'm not saying we lift that directly from these manuals and reproduce it today. Some of it could be, but I'm not saying we necessarily do that. Supplant or replace it with whatever you want. Calisthenics, weighted calisthenics, skills calisthenics, powerlifting, strongman, CrossFit, casual lifting, cardio. It doesn't really matter to me. But what does matter is that it's getting done. And I would say that it would make sense to build your routine around martial arts specific stuff. But at this stage, I don't really care. This is not a hill that I will necessarily die on. I just want to see better people in better fitness, better shape. I've been to a couple dojos, different dojos around Japan in the last couple months, traveling and doing things like that. And the one thing that I consistently run into is people who are like, oh, this practice is so vigorous, I just can't keep up, woe is me. And I'm going at like 30%. I'm not in shape. I have a gut that I'm currently, I'm filming this in the middle of trying to get rid of it. I'm in the middle of a intermittent fast and I'm doing my workout. I'm not saying people have to be superhuman, but I am so tired of it's like they run into these martial problems where their cardio runs out, their gas tank runs out, they can't get their techniques to work, and they go home and they eat fried food and they try to think of, well, I just don't know the right deep lore esoteric body mechanic. If only, fuck that. Go lift heavy things and put them back down. Go for a run. Do high rep push-ups, sit-ups, and squats and pull-ups. Do something. People just don't want to put the effort in traditional martial arts. And again, I try to be respectful and kind to people about this because obviously, my desire is genuinely a positive result. And it is counterintuitive to go into people's comment sections and be like, well, you're not in shape. That's not going to inspire anything in them. So don't be rude to people. But it is something that I would want to see. But I can't control what people do. But I can control what I do. And this is one part of traditional martial arts that, again, I find myself splitting on. Fitness forward. At this point in my martial arts tenure, I think that most of my training, should basically just be fitness, somewhere between 60 and 80%. Because at this point, the stuff that I like, I know what I like. The stuff that I'm good at, I know that I'm good at. It doesn't mean that I can't learn new things, but the reality is it's in my bones. The way that my body reacts now is, I don't want to say it's set in stone, but for the most part, that foundation is laid. Now it's just about efficiency of expression. Number one, I need sources. I need data. I need hard stuff. The anecdotes are secondary. Reinterpretations are fine if people are out about it. But I don't just want, well, we train this way in the dojo and it works, therefore it's historical. It must be the secret all along. That's not evidence of that. Again, I would point to the buggy choke. The buggy choke was here all along. No, it wasn't. The triangle choke was part of judo all along. No, it wasn't. It was invented in the 1920s, probably somewhere in the south of Japan. It's like you need data, you need sources, not fucking anecdotes. I'm so tired of that. So in that sense, I'm more historically aligned than traditionally aligned. Number two, I do think there needs to be some form of competition. I'm not saying it necessarily needs to reflect perfect self-defense or perfect martial arts, and I don't think it should become an institution. You would find me checking out of that project as soon as you start charging and you're trying to make money and sell merch and make it a spectator. I think all that stuff is a pipeline to the enshittification of martial arts. That goes too far. I'm not opposed to competition, but I am opposed to the institutionalization of competition. And I know it's a slippery slope. It might not be possible in practice, but I guess for now, just gracefully accept my idealism on that point. And then third and final, fitness forward. I think as much as I like to theory craft, as much as I like to look at intellectual solutions, as much as I like to shift the context and look at things from different perspectives, I think that only goes so far as you can actually do the things that you say you can do. And part of that is the competition from the last part. I think, the functional testing, but a big part of it's just fitness. People are desperately out of shape. I looked into, thanks to AI, because I'm shit at math, and I know I take this with a grain of salt because AI is not perfect, but I was plugging some prompts in the other day, and the average male, when they're retracting their arm in with their full body, is producing somewhere between 120 and 150 pounds of, I know American, I'm sorry, pounds of force, whatever that is in kilograms. America, bang bang. I can't be forced to to convert here in real time. I just told you I'm bad at math. But my point is that if that's the case, if this function is up to 150 pounds, then Aikidoka, you better be able to pull more than that, because so much of our stuff is isolation of the arm. So fitness forward. And I just all in one go, sources and data, competition, fitness forward. Conclude, does that make me a modern martial artist? I don't think so. I don't like that dichotomy anyway. And honestly, I don't even really like the title of historical, air quotes, martial artist. But maybe I need to come up with some kind of catchy phrase to kind of encapsulate this philosophy. But No, I don't think I'm a modern martial artist because, well, I just pretty much dissed the institutionalization of combat sport, which is going to immediately make me break from most modern martial artists. And I'm certainly not a traditional martial artist for the whole reason, all the reasons that I listed in this video. Uh, and yeah, historical maybe is probably the best way to describe me, but I think then people will come along and think, well, then he's not very forward minded, when in fact I am. If it were up to me, and it's not, obviously, I've grown to just accept that on this channel, that no matter how many drops I put in the bucket, the traditional martial artists don't want to change. Modern art martial artists don't want to change. They just want to do the thing. And that's fine. I'm just here to offer an alternative. I'm not out to change culture anymore. You can either buy into what I'm selling or not. It is what it is. But I don't want people to see, oh, he identifies as a historical martial artist and think that I'm all about preservation or looking backwards. I'm not. If it were up to me, martial arts would have 5-year plans. We want to be here by 5 years. We want the average student to be able to do X, Y, and Z, et cetera, et cetera. I'm not backward minding. And in the past, I've said maybe physical culturist is a better approach. And maybe that is the better way of thinking about it, especially with my emphasis on fitness and things like that. But physical culturist has weird connotations too if you look at it from a historical thing. Like, I don't think that any of this should have anything to do with national identity or anything like that, which historically physical culture as a term has had that association. So I don't know if you've got some snarky hit new fandangled groovy term to apply to all this that won't undercut my meaning, then by all means, post it in the comments. Anyway, I expect the audio on this to be jank as shit. I can't be bothered to edit. Like I said, I'm just kind of in between sets, but I wanted to get this out there. I could have just made a post about it, but I feel like I need to make a video, but at the same time, I don't want to put all the effort to making a video, so you're getting me sitting on my mats in between push-ups. If you like this style of video, knock yourself out and put it in the comments. If the audio is jank, I apologize. I'll figure something out in the future if I want to continue this style. Yeah, that's everything. Catch you next time. Peace.